What's up my friends, welcome back to the channel. Summertime is finally here, and with summer comes a lot more trail running. And today I'm bringing you my full review of the wildly popular HOKA SPEEDGOAT. This time we have version 6. Let's get into it. Now, for full disclosure, HOKA was good enough to send me this pair of the Speedgoat 6 for the purpose of review. However, they haven't told me what to say, they don't have any editorial privileges, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own. With that said, you can pick up a pair of the HOKA Speedgoat 6 for $155. And the great news is that they haven't raised the price over last year's Speedgoat 5. Alright guys, this has been a fun one for me. Especially fun because typically I don't run on trails too often. So when I get trail shoes, especially something as exciting as a new Speedgoat, you better believe I am excited to go out and try them out, even if I have to drive somewhere to actually test them properly. So let's get started with those specs. Now in the men's version we have 40mm in the heel, 35 in the forefoot, and in the women's version we have 38 in the heel, 33 in the forefoot, both for a 5mm drop. HOKA claims that in a US men's size 10, the Speedgoat 6 will tip the scale at 9.8 ounces or 278 grams. And some good news is that this is 20 grams lighter than the Speedgoat 5. Of course, in my size things get a little heavier, and in my size, a US men's size 12.5, the Speedgoat 6 tips the scale at 11.3 ounces or 319 grams. So really not too bad. Gotta remember, this isn't a road racing shoe. Trail shoes are typically going to be a little heavier. So for a trail shoe in my size, 319 grams is actually pretty good. And the shoe does feel light on my foot. But let's get started at the top. We'll work our way down. Let me hold this up for you guys to see. We can see we've got a good amount of padding around the heel collar. That just creates a lovely step-in feel. There's enough padding here that it grips the back of your ankle nicely. The heel counter is very rigid, which is definitely what we want on a trail shoe. Sometimes things get a little squirrely on the trails. We want to make sure our shoe is fitted nicely. We've got this little heel pull right on the back, although I didn't find I had to use it. Found it pretty easy to put my foot in, get everything situated. And for the upper, this is something that HOKA has updated after last year, and they updated it primarily because they were getting a few complaints that the upper on the Speedgoat 5 was just a little stretchy when it got worn in. They've totally rectified it this year. They're using a lovely lightweight woven textile upper. It's light, it's breathable, and it feels pretty resilient. Now there aren't too many overlays on the Speedgoat 6. We do have a little bit of reinforcement coming along the toe box on the outside that is going to give a little bit of protection from kicking rocks, things like that, although it's not over the top. Like if you purposely kick a rock, your foot is not going to be protected. We've got the HOKA branding here on the lateral side, a little bit of something, I think this is just for aesthetic purposes, on the heel, and then we've got the reinforcement coming right along the eyelet chain. What we're talking about the upper, HOKA has also included a dynamic vamp, and basically this is going to give a little flexibility in the forefoot. So while this upper is quite rigid, this dynamic vamp is going to let your feet move around a little more than they ordinarily would. Let's come to the inside, and on the inside we have the tongue. The tongue is not overly padded. We do have a fairly large piece of padding right here, which is exactly where you're going to be tying your laces, so that's pretty good placement. We have a lace loop right here in the middle, and then the tongue is gusseted on both sides. I didn't experience any tongue migration in the Speedgoat 6, which is to be expected because the tongue has nowhere to go. It is tied in nicely. Now while the upper doesn't have too many overlays, if we come to the inside, HOKA is now using an internal chassis system. And basically this is like a little reinforcement or little reinforcement strips along the inside of the upper, and they just create a little bit of structure. So when you cinch down those laces, you are pulling that upper tight around your foot. It seems to work quite well. My foot felt very secure when I had it all locked in. And that's actually saying something in some trail shoes, because when you're going up and down and your footing is getting a little loose, you really want to be sure that those shoes are attached properly. You want to be sliding around on the inside. That actually reminds me to tell you, if this is the first review you've seen of mine, I have found that I have to go down half a size in most HOKA shoes. So I think for most other brands, my sizing is US men's size 13. In HOKA's, I generally take a men's size 12.5. That's just something for you to keep in the back of your mind. The Speedgoat 6 does have a removable insert, which is definitely to be expected, especially in a pair of trail shoes. I know that every time I've taken these out, they have gotten absolutely filthy, and I really have to take them apart and hose them off. Now, let's come down to the midsole. And this is somewhere else where HOKA has made some big changes, big improvements. I guess there is a difference between improvements and changes. Anyone can make a change, but we hope that they are improvements. In this case, the midsole is definitely an improvement. Now, HOKA is still using a compression molded EVA, but it's a new and improved compression molded EVA. And if you remember, they did the same thing with the Mark 6. And it seems to me that EVA kind of has a bad reputation. Maybe it's a little too heavy, but HOKA has done something right with the compression molded EVA that they're using on their shoes, because I found this to be light and responsive, and also with a Mark 6, and it really feels good underfoot. It feels protective, and at least on the flatter parts of the trails, it feels like I can actually pick up the pace. Now, if we come down to the outsole, you can see we have a good coverage. In fact, it's almost full coverage. We've got a little bit of exposed midsole foam here, but HOKA is using Vibram Megagrip with traction lugs. Now, these are 5mm lugs, and for those of you that know your Speedgoat, you have probably noticed that they have changed the outsole lug design as to provide better traction. Now, HOKA marketing will tell you that these lugs are shaped like little hooves, the hooves of a goat perhaps, and maybe that's true. But I also want to draw your attention, I don't even know if you're going to see it on this camera in the studio, but these lugs on the bottom are actually multi-dimensional. So they're 5mm lugs in thickness, but then they kind of step down just a little bit. And then there is like a little dot of rubber on the step. And basically no one explained this to me, but I assume that it's acting like little teeth on the ground when you're running. Maybe it's creating more surface area so those teeth get to bite into the ground, hopefully prevent you from slipping. But I think it's a good idea. Now, if I'm totally honest with you guys, I haven't got to test this shoe to its potential. I live in Florida, so there aren't too many mountains around where I live. But I have been able to take it out on some smaller hills. There was some mud, there was some dirt, there was some rocks, and I got to run in it in some pretty challenging conditions for me. For the most part, I was using the Speedgoat 6 for some hard-packed trails, and that is where I noticed that the Speedgoat 6 was able to pick up the pace when I needed to. So when I'm running up and down, I'm probably more thinking about just staying on my feet, not slipping. But when things start to get a little level, not so technical, I like to be able to pick up the pace. The Speedgoat 6 handled that well. Oh, I should also say that I did have to run to the trails on a couple of days that I was using this shoe, and while running to the trails, I was running on the road. And while not ideal, this is not like the Challenger 7 that is made for both road and trail running. The Speedgoat 6 was not uncomfortable to run on the roads, especially for a small amount of time. Obviously, the Vibram Megagrip is going to be a little firmer, so when you're running on the roads, it starts to get a little clickety-clackety, but I was able to deal with it fairly well. When I got to the trails, I was happy to have them on. Oh, one more thing about these outsole lugs. Just look at the pattern of them. So on the forefoot, the lugs are pointing down. If I do that, you can see the shape of them. And that's so when you are climbing a hill, these lugs will dig into the ground, hopefully give you more traction. And then on the bottom here, those lugs are reversed and they're facing the other direction. And this is so when you're bombing down a hill and you're landing on your heels and you're trying to stop, these lugs placed on the back of the shoe are giving you that extra braking power. It's a pretty well thought out design. Oh, I do just want to circle back to the upper because it is that woven textile. And I do want to mention that every time I ran in the Speedgoat 6, my feet always got soaked. Whether this is from running in the morning and running through grass with dew, running on wet trails, or just sweating so much that I soaked them through. However they got wet, they got wet. And I didn't find the upper got loose at all. My feet were as secure in the shoe at the start of the run as they were at the end of the run. Now, I didn't do any river crossings or stream crossings in the Speedgoat 6, but just looking at the upper, it seems like they would drain fairly well, and the extra weight from me soaking the shoes, even if it wasn't from a river, wasn't noticeable on my feet when I was running. I can't say that about every trail shoe that I've tested. So my overall impression of the HOKA Speedgoat 6 is certainly positive. I would love to really test out this shoe in some like mountainous, rocky and muddy conditions. So I will definitely be keeping this around for future use. So now I want to hear from you. Are you a fan of the HOKA Speedgoat? What was the last version you ran in? And are you thinking about picking up a pair of the Speedgoat 6? Drop a comment and let me know. Okay, it's Matt B. This has been my review of the HOKA Speedgoat 6. Be kind, be happy, run well. I'll see you in a couple of days.